for your own marhumin and the marhumin of the rest of the community, please recite in Surah Al-Fatiha. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن صلوا على محمد وعلى محمد. If I can have all the brothers come closer to the minbar and make sure that we're not blocking the doorway so that others can join. And as well the sisters, if you need space for others, fill in the gaps on the to your right, inshallah. There's some space for a little bit farther up. It's okay, I won't fight tonight. You can just come forward a little bit. Jazakallah. And if we can fill in the gaps to your right, brothers, inshallah. Just a little bit more. Jazakallah. You can move to your right so that others can come in. صلوا على محمد وعلى محمد. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وبه نستعين إنه خير ناصر ومعين. ثم الصلاة والسلام والتحية والإكرام على سيدنا ونبينا أبي القاسم محمد. وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين سيما بقية الله في الأرضين وحجته على الخلق أجمعين. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك. عليك مني سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين واللعنة الدائمة على أعدائهم أجمعين من الآن إلى يوم الدين. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. أما بعد، فقد قال الله الحكيم في محكم كتابه الكريم: أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. إنما وليكم الله ورسوله والذين آمنوا الذين يقيمون الصلاة ويؤتون الزكاة وهم راكعون ومن يتولى الله ورسوله والذين آمنوا فإن حزب الله هم الغالبون. صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلى الله عليه وسلم. Dear brothers and sisters in Iman, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We have arrived to the ninth night of the month of Muharram, and in these nights that we have been together, we have been discussing this ayah of Surah Al-Ma'idah, in which Allah says, indeed, your wali is Allah, His Prophet, and believers who establish prayer and give zakat, give sadaqah. In the Quran, zakat is many times used for sadaqah, not the zakat that we are usually familiar with. And they establish prayer, they give zakat while they are in ruku'. Then Allah says, and whoever has these individuals as his wali, مَنْ يَتَوَلَّى اللَّهَ وَرَسُولَهُ, his wali is Allah, the Prophet, and these believers, then the party of Allah are the ones who are victorious. Last night we mentioned who these believers are. According to various tafasir, this ayah was revealed when Amirul Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam gave charity to the man in need while he was praying to Allah. And he was in ruku', he extends his hand for the man to take the ring off of his finger and to use that to feed himself and fulfill his needs. And Allah reveals this verse for Amir al-Mu'mineen. According to various ahadith, in fact, it is not just this verse, but all the other verses that Allah speaks to the mu'mineen at the helm and at the highest point of Iman is Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ali ibn Abi Talib himself. Whenever Allah speaks to the mu'mineen, He is referring to Amir al-Mu'mineen. And as I mentioned, Allah in His creation, ultimately His creation is a story of the Prophet. And it is the relationship between the Prophet and Allah. But as well, the Quran is in one way a dialogue and a conversation between Allah and His Prophet. And so the Prophets and the Ahlulbayt who receive their knowledge and their wisdom from the Prophet of Allah, they are the ones who know the ins and the outs of the Quran. In various ahadith, we have that only those who are addressed by Allah know the full meaning of the Quran. We use these verses usually to establish our wilayah and our loyalty to Amir al-Mu'mineen, saying that why is it that we say that Amir al-Mu'mineen is our wali and he is the wali of Allah, and we pledge our allegiance and our loyalty to Amir al-Mu'mineen Imam Ali because of verses like this. إِنَّمَا وَلِيُّكُمُ اللَّهُ وَرَسُولُهُ وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا. The same wilayah that we have to Allah, we have to His Prophet. That same wilayah is the wilayah that we have to Imam Ali. And we use this to define who we are as the followers of the school of the Ahlulbayt. Sometimes it becomes a question for us, particularly those of us who interact with other schools of Islamic thought and practice. What is it that distinguishes the school of the Ahlul Bayt from other schools? Is it our azadari? Is it our matam? Is it our poetry? Is it all of these other things that we sometimes partake in? These are all signs and symbols, manifestations of something deeper, a deeper principle that every follower of the school of the Ahlul Bayt, he adheres to and he abides by. But these are not what makes us followers of the Ahlul Bayt. It is asked from one of the companions of the Ahlul Bayt, what makes you a Shia and a follower of this school versus any of the other schools of Islam? He answers, because whenever there was a disagreement amongst any of the companions who received and learned from the Prophet of Allah, we would look at the actions and the lessons and the directions of Amir al-Mu'mineen Imam Ali. Whenever one companion said one thing and another companion said another, how do you decide? The other schools might have one way of deciding. One person says this is a higher companion, that one says this companion is more knowledgeable. The school of the Ahlul Bayt is defined by sticking to and adhering by the lessons and the teachings of the greatest and the most knowledgeable companion amongst all of the companions that the Prophet had. And this is not just me saying this, but all of the Muslims accept that Amirul Mu'mineen was raised by Rasulullah himself. And he was taught by Rasulullah. He was trained by the Prophet. And he learned the Quran and all of the teachings of Islam from the Prophet directly. And so, whenever I have a question, whenever any of the companions disagree, I have no other option but going to that greatest companion and listening to the lessons and the teachings of Amirul Mu'mineen, Imam Ali, to distinguish for me what's the teaching of the Prophet of Islam, of the Prophet of Allah was. This is reflected in the words of many of our Imams, but in one hadith from our fifth Imam, Imam Muhammad al-Baqir alayhi salam. I'm going to have to ask the brothers to once again move so that we're not blocking the doorway. So there's space in the back there. If we can move to your right, inshallah. Brothers, if we can move to the right so we're not blocking the doorway. And move forward a little bit. Space. If you see a gap, just please move forward. This is صلوا على محمد I know we think the spot that we have chosen is very the best spot in the room, but we have to make space for other people as well. صلوا على محمد. So long as you can hear me and you can be amongst brothers, that's the best spot, inshallah. This is a hadith of the fifth Imam, Imam Muhammad al-Baqir, wherein he says, explaining and giving the tafsir of this ayah, إِنَّمَا أَنْتَ مُنْذِرٌ وَلِكُلِّ قَوْمٍ هَادٍ. You are, O Prophet of Allah, you are the warner, and for every qawm, for every people, there is a guide. The Imam says, Rasulullah al-Mundhir. وَلِكُلِّ زَمَانٍ مِنَّا هَادٍ يَهْدِيهِمْ إِلَى مَا جَاءَ بِهِ نَبِيُّ اللَّهِ ثُمَّ الْهُدَاةُ مِنْ بَعْدِهِ عَلِيٌّ ثُمَّ الْأَوْصِيَاءُ وَاحِدٌ بَعْدَ وَاحِدٍ. In this hadith, the fifth Imam, he says that every single time and every single moment in Islamic history, there is a hadi, a guide that Allah has sent to human beings. During the time of Rasulullah, Rasulullah himself was that warner. But after the Prophet passes away, Allah does not turn his attention, nor does he remove his grace from humankind. But rather, Allah continues his graces. And he continues that guidance that he gives to humankind. And the way that he gives that guidance is by showing them in moments of crisis where they can refer to, where they can go to when they are unsure about the teachings of the Prophet, where they are unsure about how to deal with their problems and their issues that have arisen between them. As I said, in moments of crisis, in moments of confusion, we have to have one place of support, one place where we can find that pure teaching of Rasulullah. In another hadith, Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq, he says, مَا جَاءَ عَنْ أَمِيرِ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ يُؤْخَذُ بِهِ وَمَا نَهَى عَنْهُ يُنْتَهَى عَنْهُ. Whatever Amirul Mu'mineen, Imam Ali, he gives, he mentions, in those moments of crisis, That is what the Shia and the followers of the school of the Ahlulbayt they take. Whatever he prohibits and he says stay away from, that is what we stay away from. And then in continuation, the Imam says, Amirul Mu'mineen Imam Ali, he would say, he would repeat amongst the Muslims, Ana qasimullahi bayna al-jannati wal-nar, wa ana al-faruq al-akbar, wa ana sahib al-asa wal-misa. That I am the divider and the criteria upon which Allah divides the people who go to heaven and go to hell. And I am that ultimate criteria that Allah has placed amongst the Muslims. I am the one who possesses all of the weapons and the relics of the previous prophets. I am the person who the Prophet himself established after he had gone. Sallu ala Muhammad wa And as I mentioned, this is one way that we relate to Amir al-Mu'mineen Imam Ali. He is our wali insofar as we pledge allegiance to him and we are loyal to the Imam after the Prophet is gone. So that in those moments of crisis, in those moments of confusion, when we are choosing between which companion and which source to follow to reach back to the Prophet of Allah, then we chose the purest path, the most knowledgeable and the most noble path, and the wisest path. Once we have moved beyond that, however, we want to not just think about our identity, but we also want to learn from the life of Amirul Mu'mineen and from his teachings so that we become something similar to the Imam. The Imam who is the perfect human being, the most noble of men. How do we as well become something close? However imperfect we are, we become a human being like him. And this is where we look at the life of Amirul Mu'mineen, not in terms of those basic principles that Imam Ali set, those basic values that he portrayed. But as I mentioned yesterday, Amirul Mu'mineen brought all of the greatest fada'il that a human being could acquire. Think about your soul as a garden. And this garden has the potential, might not have it right now, but it has the potential to give life to many different types of flowers and trees. And so the task that we have as human beings is to figure out exactly what types of flowers, what types of trees, and what types of weeds and filth we allow in our soul. As a human being, we want to beautify who we are, so that on the day of judgment, when Allah calls me to Him, and I am in Allah's court, and He is now judging who I am, Allah says, all of the houses and all of the cars, all of the people that surrounded you, none of that is going to help you. Not even your salat and your siyam and the zakat that you gave is going to help you. The only thing that is going to help us, brothers and sisters in Iman, when everyone has left our sides and when Allah has taken everything from us, is a pure heart. إِلَّا مَنْ أَتَى اللَّهَ بِقَلْبٍ سَلِيمٍ. The only person who is going to be successful on the day of judgment is a person who has a pure and righteous heart. And so our tasks, brothers and sisters, in this world is to try to cultivate that beautiful garden of the soul. If it were up to me, then I would waste my life, I would let those weeds grow in my soul until I find 70 years have passed, 80 years have passed, and I have wasted my life and wasted all of those opportunities. And so I take lessons from the life of Amir al-Mu'mineen, Imam Ali. I know, in other words, all of the principles, all of the basic values. But when I look in the life of Amir al-Mu'mineen, I figure out what does it look like to live a beautiful life. How to decide, at this point, I have to be charitable. At this point, I have to be stingy. At this point, I have to be brave, and at this point, I have to be silent. At this point, I have to think about my hereafter, and at this point in my life, I have to think about how to sustain myself and my family. We organize, in other words, our tasks as a human being is that we organize our lives so that in those moments of crisis, we are able to succeed and figure out what types of decisions I have to make. And this is where the stories, as I mentioned last night, the stories of Amir al-Mu'mineen Imam Ali and the rest of the A'imma, they become very good lessons for each one of us. Because we all know the very basic principles, but it is how we make those decisions, how we prioritize one thing in one situation and another in another. I'll just mention one story and move on. There is a very beautiful khutbah that Amir al-Mu'mineen, he gives to one of his companions in the city of Basra. After the Imam was coming back from the battle of Siffin, he goes to visit one of his companions who had fallen ill, a man by the name of Ala ibn Ziyad al-Harithi. And this man, he had a very beautiful and a large house. We're thinking about Amir al-Mu'mineen, again, as the person who is pious, as a person who is turning away from this world, and who is an ascetic and so on. And he comes to the house of one of his companions and he says, well, this is a very nice house that you have. It's a big house. And the question is, what are you going to do with this house in this world when you are going to need an abode and a residence like this more in the hereafter than you are in this world? In other words, this is just going to be a chain for you in this world, and Allah is going to hold you to account. If the story ended there, then we would have said that Amir al-Mu'mineen is talking about Zuhd. He is emphasizing Zuhd. But because Amir al-Mu'mineen is not just thinking about the basic principles, but how to live a beautiful life, the story goes that Amir al-Mu'mineen, Imam Ali, he says, but if you use this world, if you use this house that you have created for yourself as a way of bringing together the believers, of connecting yourself to your family, of spreading the blessings and the bounties that God has given you, then you can take this house with you to that Jannah, to the hereafter. And it's not going to be an obstacle in your path. Taking different values and prioritizing them and using those means as a way to get closer to Allah. And this man, Ala, he says, inshallah, I will try my best to bring together the mu'mineen, but I do have a brother, and I have some criticism of my brother. Again, the greatest, the highest value we sometimes think is zuhd, but Amir al-Mu'mineen says to this man Ala, when Ala tells him that my brother, he has separated himself from the world and he has become an ascetic, and he is now burdening his own family because he is not providing for them. Amir al-Mu'mineen says, bring this man to me. Brother by the name of Asim tells him that your task is not to be a burden upon other people, but your task in this world is to fulfill your responsibilities that you have to those who Allah has placed within your life. Yes, do dua. Yes, do ibadah. But do ibadah both through those means that give your life meaning and give your life some color, but as well through the responsibilities, fulfilling those responsibilities that God has placed in your life. Providing for your family, bringing together the different mu'mineen closer to each other by fulfilling their needs, by caring for them in whatever way you can. Brothers and sisters, it is in terms of prioritizing these different values that we get the greatest lessons from the life of the Ahlulbayt. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala. And on a larger scale, we have these questions about the state of the Muslim Ummah. On the one hand, we are figuring out our identity as the Shia, as followers of the school of the Ahlulbayt. On the other hand, we think about how we can draw those lessons for our own personal lives, but then we find that in moments of crisis for the Muslim Ummah, that Amirul Mu'mineen and the rest of the A'imma, they made those choices to further the Muslim Ummah in those moments of crisis. And this brings me to my final point. Brothers and sisters in Iman, when we say that the Ahlul Bayt are the sources of guidance for the Muslims, it is not always in the way that we might expect. Sometimes you can be a source of guidance by speaking out, and sometimes you can be a source of guidance by being silent. And this is the lesson that we draw from the life of Amirul Mu'mineen in those crucial moments when the Muslim Ummah turned their backs against the Imam. The Imam did not press his position. In fact, Wilayat that the Ahlul Bayt talked about, on the one hand, it is about expressing that guidance, but it is also about considering the place and the capacity of the Muslims. And sometimes that capacity requires the Imam to stay silent. There are ahadith in which the Imams tell us that the Prophet came and he established the nation. He created, in other words, the space within which the Muslims could potentially be guided back to Allah. They do the salat, they do the siyam, so that their hearts will, inshallah, with the will and the grace of Allah, be opened to that guidance. But it is using their own will that now they have to come to the Imam. The Imam, in other words, is like the Kaaba. The Kaaba does not come to you. You have to go to the Kaaba. We ask Allah to bring us and allow us to come closer to Him, but it is through that will and that choice of each Muslim to come closer to Allah. And this is the lesson that we have about the Wilayat in particular of the Ahlul Bayt. They're not going to force the Muslims to believe in them or to even accept their Wilayat. But if they turn their back, having known the Wilayat of the Ahlul Bayt, then they will have cut themselves off from guidance. On the one hand, this is a very difficult charge against the Muslims. But on the other hand, this also tells us that Allah does not stop His guidance from the believers, from the Muslims. We only have to express our willingness to accept that. And so in various ahadith, we have that Amirul Mu'mineen, and when we look in history as well, after the death of Rasulullah, when the Muslims were debating about which path to choose, in that moment of crisis, when Amirul Mu'mineen was figuring out and was seeing how to guide the Muslims back, he continues to express that he is أَنَا قَسِيمُ اللَّهِ بَيْنَ الْجَنَّةِ وَالنَّارِ. He would call the Muslims and he would tell them that, do you not remember how the Prophet of Allah, he said that I am going to be his wasi. And he would constantly remind the Muslims of all of the ahadith, all of the verses, all of the signs that Rasulullah had given him. But when the Muslims ultimately turned their backs, he became silent. If he had stood up, then maybe there would have been a greater danger for the Muslims. Maybe this fledgling community that the Prophet had created, this would have been threatened by external forces. As I mentioned last night, there were different empires that were trying to destroy this Muslim ummah. And so maybe one of the reasons why Amir al-Mu'mineen did not fight against all of the other people who were surrounding, maybe that is the reason why. And maybe it is because Amir al-Mu'mineen understood that the wilayah, and he knew that the wilayah that Allah gives, it is a privilege for the Muslims. It is a form of guidance for the Muslims, and they now have to take the step forward. And so sometimes we might think that if only he would have done such and such, if only he would have called them out more, then our state and our situation would have been better. In other words, we become hopeless when things don't go our way. But we see that after years and years have passed, after 1,000 years have passed, only now can we look back. If the Muslim Ummah had fragmented, then there would not have been a place for Amir al-Mu'mineen. But it is only after thousands of years have passed that we see that whenever the Muslims, in whichever culture, in whichever society they are, they will see that guidance, and they will see that light of Amir al-Mu'mineen because they are a part of this nation. You look in all of the different spiritual lineages that the Muslim Ummah and the Muslim civilization has brought to bear. You look in the different forms of literature that we have in Muslim history. The place of Amir al-Mu'mineen Imam Ali is unparalleled within the Muslim Ummah. Yes, some people might look at other companions, but if you want to look at the knowledge and the valor and the courage and the iman and the zuhd of any one of the companions of Rasulullah, want to look at the peak of what it means to be a human being, Muslims all recognize Amir al-Mu'mineen Imam Ali and they praise him. This is the person that you look for fatwa. This is the person that you look for ma'nawiyah. And each one of these different Muslims express this in their own tongue. I will just mention this very beautiful poem to express how each culture and each people, they present their love and their praise for Amir al-Mu'mineen. Since we have Farsi speakers and some people who understand Farsi, I just want to mention this and then move on, inshallah. Sallallahu alaihi wa sallam. And this, in fact, is itself a sign of how the person of Amir al-Mu'mineen can bring all of the different forms and people within Islam and the Muslim Ummah together. It's a very famous poem in Farsi by an Azari who he was a very close contemporary. So this man, his first language was Azari, a man by the name of Shahriyar, but he writes in Persian, and he is using all of the different fada'il of Amir al-Mu'mineen, and he's presenting them in this poem. He says, Ali ey humay rahmat, to che ayati khuda ra. He says, Ali ey humay rahmat, to che ayati khuda ra, ke be ma seva fekandi hame saye huma ra. Ali, you are that mythic bird, the source of Allah's compassion and His mercy, His rahmah. What beautiful type of sign of Allah you are. That it is through you that Allah presents His bounties upon all of His creation. دل اگر خدا شناسی همه در رخ علی بین به علی شناختم من به خدا قسم خدا را. If, oh my heart, you want to know who Allah is, see it all within the face of Ali. I want to know how to do ibadah, to worship Allah. I look at the example of Amirul Mu'mineen, not just in the moments that he was alone and speaking with Allah, but as well in the moments that he was in the battlefield and he was doing the dhikr and the remembrance of Allah. When he was with his companions and with his community, and they were turning their backs against Amirul Mu'mineen, in those moments he as well was doing ibadah and remembering Allah. دل اگر خدا شناسی همه در رخ علی بین به علی شناختم من به خدا قسم خدا. It is through Ali that I truly understood who Allah is. And then he continues, برو ای گدای مسکین در خانه علی زن که نگین پادشاهی دهد از کرم گدا را. O you poor and wretched soul, O you beggar, go to the door of Ali and knock on his door, because he will give you the ring of a king through his nobility and his honor. بجز از علی که گوید به پسر که قاتل من چو اسیر توست اکنون به اسیر کن مدارا. Who other than Ali would tell to his own son that my murderer and the person who is going to end my life, be kind to him. And here, brothers and sisters, the poet says, بجز از علی که آرد پسری ابوالعجائب که علم کند به عالم شهدای کربلا را. Other than Ali, who could have brought to this world a man who is the most magnificent and a person who is very straight in our eyes, who brings the most magnificent things. A person who could establish and raise and make as a sign and make very clear to all of the world the martyrs of Karbala. Imam Ali did not just have one son in Karbala, but many of either his own sons or his grandsons were present in Karbala. There is, of course, Imam al-Hussein himself, Ali al-Akbar, and many of the sons of the Imam, as well the sons of Imam al-Hassan. But there was one son that Amir al-Mu'mineen had trained from a very young age to be the protector and the aid of his son Hussein. It is said that when Lady Fatima, alayha salam, she passed away, Amir al-Mu'mineen Imam Ali, he asks for a woman who could give to him and give to his family a person who could protect Hussein. And it is said that the different tribes were sought. And one woman was found, a woman by the name of Fatima. When she marries Amir al-Mu'mineen, she asks him, do not call me Fatima anymore, because I cannot replace the great Fatima al-Zahra. Call me by the name of al-Banin. It is said that through al-Banin, Imam Ali received from Allah Abbas, Tonight, brothers and sisters, let us turn towards Ashura and towards Karbala. Let us turn our hearts and our minds to those final moments on the day of Ashura. After all of the companions had given their lives, and even the people within the household of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein had all gone and had been massacred in those plains, it is said that Abbas and Hussein were left. Abbas, he looks at Imam al-Hussein and he says, Ya Abu Abdullah, will you give me the chance to now go and give my own life to Hussein, in your path? Abbas had promised that he would be loyal and he would defend Hussein until the last drop of blood remained in his body. The night before, Zuhair and the other companions, they were testing each other. And one man comes and he tests Abbas. And he says, what are you going to do on the morrow? And Abbas says, I am going to defend Hussein, even if it means that my body is going to be cut to pieces. Abbas, he was a man of valor and of strength, but he was also a man of ghira, of chivalry. And Hussein turns to Abbas on the day of Ashura and he says, Oh Abbas, if you go out into the battlefield, then who is going to be the flag bearer and uphold the standard of my army? It's a very difficult moment for Abu al-Fadl. And it said that Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas, he turns to the Imam and he says, Oh my Imam, there is no more army left for me to be the standard bearer of that army. Everyone has given their lives in your path. What army is there and what standard is this when everyone is gone? Oh Hussein, it is only you and me left. And now I want to give my life for your path. And then it is said that maybe at that moment the cries of the children become very loud. And Imam al-Hussein turns to Abbas. He says, Oh Abbas, you have my permission, but do you not hear the cries of the children? They have not had water to drink for all of these days, and the sun is bearing down upon them, and they have become unbearably thirsty. Oh Abbas, before you go out and you give your life, fulfill this one task and this one need of mine. Go and bring some water for the children. And it is said that Abbas, whenever he would hear a request of the Imam, he would be the first to go and fulfill that request. It is said that Abbas, without even thinking twice or questioning the order of the Imam, he turned and he got that water skin to go out towards the river and to get some water for the children. When brothers and sisters, inshallah, Allah gives us the opportunity to go and visit Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas. The riverside is not very far from the camp, but Abbas sees this task of his and he fulfills the request of the Imam. He is the most loyal member of the army. And yet it is said that the army had stopped and had blocked the path towards the riverbank. But Abbas does not stop, does not allow anything to be in his way. There is no barrier too great for Abbas. And so it is said that he rides his horse and he prepares his armor and his weapons and he goes towards the riverbank and he breaks open the lines of the enemy's army. And then he gets to the riverside. He enters the river, this flowing and bountiful river, and he fills up the water skin. Abbas himself had not had any water to drink for days and days. And he is now in the center of the river, and he could quench his own thirst. It is said that he takes a cup of water in his hands from that water. But then he remembers the thirst of Hussein. Think of the loyalty and the dedication of Abbas. Think of the valor and the courage of Abbas, that it takes him just a moment to think of Hussein. And so he casts down that water. کفی از آب آورد چون به نزدیک دهان عکس شش ماهه در آن آب تماشا می‌کرد. The poet says, when he picked up that water to drink, he did not just see Hussein, but he as well saw the picture and the reflection of Ali al-Asghar, that 6-month-old infant of Hussein, that infant that Hussein in just a few moments is going to now present to the enemy army. And the enemy army themselves is going to quench the thirst of that 6-month-old infant. And it is said that Abbas, he casts down the water. He fills his water skin and he gets back onto his horse. Abbas has a mission that he is going to fulfill whatever may come. And yet the enemy soldiers stand in his way. It is said that he goes towards Hussein, but the enemy soldiers, they come and circle around Abbas. It is said that he fights a very valiant fight, but at one moment, the enemy soldier tries to come and rip the water skin from the hand of Abbas. And they are unsuccessful. But now they have cut the hand of Abbas. And he calls out, Wallahi in qata'tamu yamini. Inni uhami abadan an dini. Wa ala imam sadiq al-yaqini. Najl al-nabi al-tahir al-amini. You might cut my right arm, but I am not going to stop defending my imam. This imam who is righteous and the grandson of the Prophet of Allah that you all claim to adhere to. And yet Abbas goes just a few steps forward and then they cut off his left arm. They are trying to take the hope out of the heart of Abbas. But Abbas does not lose hope. Neither in the hope of Allah, but nor does he swerve from his mission. It is said when they cut off his right arm, he places the water skin in his left. But when they cut off the left arm, he places the water skin in his mouth. When did Abbas lose hope? It is not when his body is bloodied and bruised, not when his body is filled with the injuries of the sword and the arrows and the stones and with whatever the enemy soldiers would throw at him. But the moments that Abbas lost all of his hope was when that enemy soldier, he cast the arrow into the water skin and the water began to drop from that water skin until finally the water skin is emptied. And Abbas, he cannot go back to the camp. How can he face Hussein? How can he face Sakina al-Ali al-Asghar when he hasn't fulfilled his mission? And it is said that now Abbas does not know which way to turn. Should he go back to the camp or should he go back to the riverside? Until finally an arrow is struck into the eye of Abbas. And then one of the enemy soldiers comes and hits Abbas on the back of his head. And it is said that Abbas's strength is seeping from his body. Brothers and sisters in Iman, when a man is struck and he is falling upon the ground, usually we would try to hold our arms out to brace our fall. But what does a man do who does not have any arms to protect himself, any arms to brace his fall? It is said that Abbas falls to the ground upon his glorious face. Qamar Bani Hashim, the moon of the Bani Hashim, has now been eclipsed. Brothers and sisters in Iman, Hussein is looking upon this scene and he cannot help his brother Abbas until finally a moment comes that Abbas, he says, Ya Akha, Adrik Akhak, oh my brother Hussein, come and save and defend your brother Abbas. Until that moment, Abbas had not called his brother by the name, oh my brother. But in those final moments of his life, Abbas calls upon Hussein. And it is said that Hussein, he runs towards Abbas, and like a lion, he spreads the enemy soldiers and he cuts them down. But it's not until the body of Abbas is cut to pieces. It is said, and many of us know, those of us who have gone to Karbala, there is not much distance between the grave of Abbas and the grave of Hussein. Between Abbas and the camps of Imam al-Hussein. But what is it that's caused Imam al-Hussein to leave the body of Abbas where he found it? Imam al-Hussein is all alone. And at no other point in this day did Imam al-Hussein say that my strength has ceased from my body. All of my hopes have been dashed. It is said that at this moment, however, brothers and sisters, the hopes of Imam al-Hussein have been vanquished. Imam says, Al-an inkasara dhahri. Now is the time that my back is bent. Now is the time that all my plans have become nothing. And now Hussein cannot bring back the body of Abbas back to the tent. Whether it is because that body has been cut to pieces, or it is because he knew that Abbas did not want to go back to the tent without having fulfilled the request of the children. And so when Hussein goes back, it is said that Hussein does not say a word to the children. They come and they circle around the Imam. They say, where is our uncle Abbas? Where is our uncle? Where is the water that he had promised us? And Imam al-Hussein stays silent until he goes to the tent of Abbas and he pulls it down. And that is when the children knew that their fate is sealed, that Abbas is not going to come anymore. وَسَيَعْلَمُ الَّذِينَ ظَلَمُوا أَيَّ مُنْقَلَبٍ يَنْقَلِبُونَ مَا تَرَكُوا.
Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein.